men are more oppressed than women.
In certain ways, I would agree.
So your only evidence to prove that men are more oppressed than women is that men have to go to war? That's really bold of you to bring up the fact that men have to go to war as evidence in your bucket as if that gender role was not created by men. Then, in order to duck the argument when she said that it was because of the patriarchy, you immediately run to, oh, the patriarchy doesn't exist. And then you start talking about World War I and II, as if Russia, for example, wasn't deploying female troops during World War I, and the United States also had women troops fighting in World War II alongside Russia and countless other countries. Yes, there were more men fighting in the military than women, but again, the people that created that gender role for men that men hate so much were men. And even if I grant you that point, that still doesn't erase the fact that women have been oppressed for a very long time. They haven't even been able to work for 100 years, and it's only been a little over 100 years since they were allowed to vote. Not to mention that it took into the late 19th century and into the early 20th century for women to not be considered property anymore. They weren't allowed to own their own property until 1900, and they weren't allowed to divorce their husbands until 1969, and only California did it in 1969. It took longer for other states to consider that even an option. Not to mention, women are much more likely to be victims of SA since a very young age than men. And not only that, men are majority committing violent partner crime against women. So how do you ignore all of these points just to jump to, oh, men are more oppressed than women? And that's not to say that men are not oppressed in certain ways. They are. But in the ways that they are oppressed, it's not the fault of women. It's the fault of the patriarchy. And for you to sit here and say that the patriarchy doesn't exist is directly harming men. This is why I find it very hard to believe people when they call themselves a men's rights activist. Because there's a difference between being a men's rights activist and just trying to be anti-feminism. You are just anti-feminism.